Hey, how's it going? It's Stephen here from understandingaudio.com, and today I'm going to be talking about vocals. Now, vocal mixing is something that is really important to get right in your mix, and it's also something that seems to be very confusing for a lot of people. So today I'm going to break down the 4 steps that you can take to get a great vocal mix every single time. Now, we all mix in very different ways, and I've mentioned it a few times that my background, how I originally got my break working in studios, was in post-production. And as a result of that, I would be mixing a lot of dialogue, a lot of radio and TV adverts and commercials. So that led me to put a lot of emphasis on dialogue and vocal mixing. I learned a huge amount about vocal levels, automation, compression, and EQ. But because I was so used to mixing vocals and having a real upfront sound on my vocals every single time, that transferred over into my music, and it didn't always work as well as it should have. Not every song requires a really upfront vocal, but every song and every piece of music that has vocals does require a great vocal mix. So without further ado, let me show you in just 4 steps how you can get a great vocal mix. Alright, so here I have my lead vocal from a track I mixed recently, and I'm just going to play that back for you so that you can get a feel for what I've done.
Du haut des sommets, au doux réveil du jour, j'observe émerveillé ces décors qui m'entourent.
Now, don't be alarmed, you don't need to get your ears tested. That was not English. These vocals on that track come to you from my friend Monsieur Alice, but I felt it was a great example for what I'm about to show you. Alright, so that was the finished vocal. As you can see, it has all of the inserts on, all of my plugins, and all of my sends are active. So you'll have heard delay, reverb, and harmonic effects, distortion effects happening during that vocal performance. But those effects and the spatial positioning with reverb and delay are really not as important as what's going on the inserts. Now, I say that because you might have the nicest delay or reverb on your vocal, but you just don't have that vocal sitting the way it should in the mix. It's got a really uneven sound. So if you've got that really uneven sound and it's bouncing around in the stereo field really well, it's still going to sound uneven no matter what you do and no matter what cool delay effect you put on the vocal. Okay, so before we get to that point, before we put delay and reverb effects on anything, you want to make sure that your source audio just sounds really nice and really clean and clear in the mix, if that's what you're going for. But even if you're going to do a sound or lo-fi it or whatever, first of all, you want to make sure it has its space in the mix with these 4 steps that I'm about to show you. Let me take off the inserts and the sends and just play this vocal back for you without any of my effects added. In fact, there's automation on this as well, so I should take that off too, if I can do it the right way. Do it that way. And let me play this back as I got it. The only thing that's happened here is that I've adjusted the fader level, but that shouldn't affect things too much.
Du haut des sommets, au doux réveil du jour, j'observe émerveillé ces décors qui m'entourent. Du haut des sommets, au doux réveil du jour.
All right, let me put that automation back on. Okay, now when I played that back, you probably heard in this section, you can actually see it in the waveform, that it sounded a little bit uneven. There's a jump in level here, and the same here. And it got a little bit quieter here, and as you would expect from looking at this waveform, that things are just a little bit uneven. Now, that's not to say that this is a bad recording. It's not. Or it's not to say that it's a bad vocal performance. It's not. It's actually quite a nice vocal performance. It's a good vocal performance. It's just that in the context of this mix, I wanted to create a nice, consistent vocal sound all the way throughout. Now, what a lot of people will do in this instance is just slap a compressor on that vocal. Let the compressor do all of the work and let that give you that brick wall vocal sound right in your face. And please don't do that. Compression has its place, but it's not there to squash the crap out of a vocal and take those peaks down and even everything up and just get a big fat sausage of a vocal. It's just not the way to do things, so we're not going to do it that way. So here's what we are going to do. First of all, I added a little bit of clip gain here, 1.7 dB. I also am using a trim plugin, and that's adding 2.9 dB. Now, I actually can't remember why I did those separately. You could just add the total of 4.6 dB here or here, but it must have been that I thought I had enough at one stage and then didn't, and then added a little bit more. But the reason why I'm adding that extra gain is because the average level wasn't hitting where I wanted it to be pretty consistently, which is usually around minus 18 dBFS.
Pendu haut des sommets, au doux réveil du jour.
So you can see that now it is in and around that minus 18 dBFS level. Pretty simple. That plugin is not part of my 4 steps to a great vocal mix, but it is important to have your gain stage set correctly at all times. Now the next plugin is an interesting one. It's Waves Vocal Rider. And this is actually used in tandem with the automation moves that I've done on the vocal. Let me move this over here to smooth it out. You can actually see that I've used the smooth ride setting on the vocal rider. Now you do not need Waves Vocal Rider. You do not need any plugin that does this. You can do everything here with automation. Why have I done things this way? Convenience more than anything else. Remember that my take on premium plugins is that they make your life easier, they make it more convenient, and that's why I've used this plugin. But I also like to use automation, so I've used both of them together. Both of these tools are just doing little bits, and that's a huge part of my mixing philosophy. Like I said, you don't want to just slap a compressor across the vocal and let that do everything. You want to do little bits at a time. So here's what these two techniques are doing together.
Pendu haut des sommets, au doux réveil du jour, j'observe émerveillé ces décors qui m'entourent. Pendu haut des sommets, au doux réveil.
All right, now without it.
Pendu haut des sommets, au doux réveil du jour, j'observe émerveillé ces décors
Bringing it back in.
qui m'entourent. Pendu haut des sommets, au doux réveil du jour, j'observe émerveillé ces décors qui m'entourent.
So that is our first step, automation. Now with a plugin like Vocal Rider, I like to put that at the very top of my inserts if I don't have a trim plugin there. That's going to be the first thing that goes in there on a vocal. And traditionally I would have done a lot of this vocal automation here on this first verse or throughout the song. I would have done this later in the mix. I would have done this near the end of my mix at the sweetening phase. But nowadays it doesn't really bother me too much when I do this. Sometimes it might be at the very end of the mix, sometimes it might be at the start, but automation is one of the 4 steps to getting a great vocal mix. And you're going to see why when we move on a little further down the steps. Now the next plugin and the next step, the second step to a great vocal mix, is using EQ. On this track I've used the Fab Filter Pro Q, which is a huge favorite of mine. I probably use it on most of my vocals. I use it a lot in my mixes. But for you, it really doesn't matter what EQ you use, as long as the tool is doing what you set out for it to do. Now on this vocal, I have a high pass filter at 87. And I've chosen 87 hertz by using my ears. Surprise, surprise. I'll almost always put a high pass filter on my vocals because a lot of the information below 80 hertz is generally useless on most vocals. Now, I say most vocals, it's not always the case. You might be wanting to use this space for some reason, but a lot of the time it is useless. So I put a high pass filter in place. There's a 6 dB cut at 270, 270.79 to be precise. And that's because I was getting a lot of mud in this range. So there's a lot of build up in this frequency range. So I pulled it out of there. Then a little bit of mid-range around 600. There's a little bit of weird resonance in this range. So I took out 1 dB, not much. And then up here at 6258.5 hertz, there is a boost of 4 dB. I'm adding some high end and a little bit of air to the vocals in this range. This is what this plugin is doing.
Pendu au des sommets, au doux réveil du jour, j'observe émerveillé ces décors qui m'entourent.
Take it out.
Pendu au des sommets, au doux réveil du jour, j'observe émerveillé ces décors qui m'entoure. Pendu au des sommets, au doux réveil du jour, j'observe émerveillé.
All right, so that's the next step, getting your vocal to have a nice even frequency response the whole way through. And that boost at 65.8.5 hertz really brings out the S's and T's and the shininess of that vocal for me. Now, the next step is de-essing, and I'll almost always use a de-esser plugin on vocals. Here I've used a preset on this Waves or de-esser. It is the male DS wide, and that's actually attenuating from in and around 4K and above. So when that's in action,
Pendu au des sommets, au doux réveil du jour, j'observe émerveillé ces décors.
so it's relatively aggressive. I've set the threshold so that it's taking off up to 7 dB here, and that's actually quite a lot. But you remember that I boosted a lot here in this 6 to 7K range. So if there's anything that's sibilant, anything overly harsh, this de-esser is going to attenuate it. It's going to look after it. You don't have to go for a wideband de-esser. You can go a bit more narrow if you want, but this is what I've chosen at this stage of the mix. Now the fourth step is compression, and here I've used a CLA 2A, which is the Waves model of the LA2A. If you read up on your compression history, this is basically where compressors started. They more or less started with the LA2A. It's got a relatively slow attack and release time, and I've grown to love it as my first port of call on vocals of all sorts. So here's what this is doing.
Pendu au des sommets, au doux réveil du jour, j'observe émerveillé ces décors qui m'entourent. Pendu au des
Without it.
sommets, au doux réveil du jour, j'observe émerveillé ces décors qui m'entourent.
All right, so you might be wondering, why isn't this needle going crazy? Why isn't it coming down here to -6 and 7? It doesn't need to. You don't need to see the needle moving that much. Most of the time, this was attenuating about 1 dB. And like I said, it's a pretty slow moving compressor, so I don't want it to take ages to have to reset, go back to 0, and everything just be compressed the whole time. I just want some gentle compression to even out that vocal sound to start with. And also, as you remember, before anything hits the compressor, we've already done the automation with the vocal rider and also with these automation moves in Pro Tools itself or in your DAW itself. So that's really important. You don't need to overcook your compression. So now we've very quickly gone through the 4 steps: automation, EQ, de-essing, and compression. Now here's where it gets interesting. Everybody has a different method and a different order in which they use those 4 steps. So if you wanted to, you could start with compression and then do EQ and de-essing and finally automation, or any variants of that order. But where I feel it gets really cool, no matter what order you start out with using these steps, once they're done, you can start really mixing things up. So I'm happy that I've got my 4 steps to a great vocal mix complete now, but I want to fine tune my vocal more. So the next stage is adding an 1176 compressor. Now, unlike the LA2A, the 1176 has variable attack and release times. So I've got a very fast release time here and quite a fast attack time with a 4:1 ratio. And the idea here is that this 1176 would catch faster peaks that are just coming in and out of the vocal mix. So let me play you what this 1176 is doing.
Pendu au des sommets, au doux réveil du jour, j'observe émerveillé ces décors qui m'entourent. Pendu au des sommets, au doux réveil du jour, j'observe émerveillé ces décors qui m'entourent.
All right, now I'm sure you saw that needle moving when we got these spikes in the audio in and around here.
Veille du jour, j'observe émerveillé.
You can hear that on merveillé.
Observe émerveillé.
It catches that peak on the M. So again, just gentle compression, taking off at most about 3 dB, not slamming it, but it's just another tool. We're just chipping away and just crafting the sound to how we want it to sound. I actually went in again after this and added in another de-esser. I found a sibilant frequency around 7K and I added this in. You can do the same thing. If you're not happy with what the tool you put in earlier is doing, or you think perhaps you need to add to that, you can either adjust the earlier de-esser and get that a little bit more accurate to your needs, or you can add a second one if the earlier one is doing its job and you just need to get a little bit more focused. And finally, the last plugin I used is the Orvox by Waves, because it's awesome. This is what the Orvox is doing.
Pendu au des sommets, au doux réveil du jour, j'observe émerveillé ces décors qui m'entourent. Pendu au des sommets, au doux réveil du jour.
So again, that's not doing a whole lot either, but it is smoothing out that vocal sound. If you want to know more about what the Orvox does, it is a form of compression, but it does a few other things rather than just compression. Go and read the manual on the Waves website. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I do have some effect sends going on here. I've got some delay, distortion, and reverb effects going on, but they don't actually create a great vocal mix. What creates a great vocal mix is the 4 steps that I've just gone through. First of all, obviously, automating the vocal, creating a nice even sound, and then EQing it, making sure that you've maximized the frequency range of your vocal. Then a bit of de-essing if needed, and finally some compression. Then once you're happy that you got the 4 steps in your mix, you can iterate. You can add in another de-esser or another compressor, another EQ, whatever you need. It's all about you and your taste. It's all about you and your taste with what effects you use as well. You might want to use some parallel compression, you might want to use delay, you might not want to use delay, you might want a very dry vocal. It's all up to you. But once you've gone through it and you've used those 4 steps, you're gonna have a great vocal mix. So whatever you do from there is all down to your taste. And if you only have a vague idea of what your taste is as a mixer, well, I'm here to help. Now this video is coming to an end, but I want to leave you with something that you can take away. Read all about how to apply your taste to your mixes and produce something really special. Because you've watched this video to the end, because you've stuck with me, and because you've liked and subscribed, I want to give you my free guide, the one hack that guarantees a unique pro sounding mix. Now this one hack is something that I discovered probably a little bit later than I should have in my mixing career. And once I started implementing it, I started to see a huge difference in my mixes, and I still use it to this very day to get my mixes sounding the way I want, and constantly using it as a way of tapping into my taste as a musician and a mixer, and constantly looking to improve and get better all the time. And I want you to be able to do exactly the same thing. So to download it for free, go to getpromixes.com, just stick in your email address, I'll have it sent over to you straight away, and you can get going. Now, not only am I giving you this video, the 4 steps to a great vocal mix, that free guide, but once you stick in your email address over at getpromixes.com, you're going to get free weekly emails from me from understandingaudio.com with all sorts of stuff that I don't share anywhere else, and only my subscribers get that exclusive information. So if that sounds like something that you want to get involved with, go to getpromixes.com right now, download that guide, and get going. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, subscribe to the YouTube channel, do all that good stuff. I'll be back with another video very soon, and in the meantime, keep having fun making great music.